It was political theater. The president was giving fighting words for the bloodthirsty killers of ISIS. But is his remark, or are his remarks too little, too late, after the terrorists have spent years building a safe haven in Syria?
And the president still just doesn't seem to get it, denying the butchery of ISIL is driven by Islam. White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon has the story from Washington.
President Obama addressed Americans increasingly concerned about the threat Islamic State militants pose as they increasingly doubt their commander-in-chief's ability to effectively face it.
We can't erase every trace of evil from the world, and small groups of killers have the capacity to do great harm. That was the case before 9/11, and that remains true today.
The biggest escalation to fighting over the past few weeks is the president's decision to launch airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. He's also deploying 500 additional U.S. troops to assist Iraqi security forces. America will continue fighting ISIS from the air in coordination now with Iraqis on the ground. House Speaker John Boehner responded. He has finally begun to make the case the nation has needed him to make for quite some time, that destroying this terrorist threat requires decisive action. A speech is not the same thing as a strategy, however. While the president presented a compelling case for action, many questions remain. Strong action is what Americans want. A Fox News poll shows 57% of voters think the president is weak and indecisive on foreign policy, while 54% think he's not prepared to do whatever it takes to defeat ISIS.
Because he didn't leave himself enough options in terms of how to deploy military forces, such as U.S. boots on the ground, I think there may be some things that will either have to be recalibrated in the future, or there will be a significant shortfall in what we're able to accomplish.
The president called on Congress to approve a program to train and arm moderate Syrian rebels fighting ISIS and the Assad regime. Republicans and Democrats have serious questions about specifics on the president's plan, but they appear united in wanting to be involved.
The president should be seeking congressional approval, period.
I believe it would be a grievous mistake after 13 years of war to evolve toward a new strategy of taking prolonged military action without bothering to seek congressional approval.
Meanwhile, the president reminded Americans of the brutal nature of ISIS, but he made two things clear.
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim. And ISIL is certainly not a state.
But critics have attacked the president for not acknowledging the religious motivations of the Islamic extremists. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Islamic State in Syria, Islamic State in the Levant, it's not Islamic. You wonder what planet our president lives on. I want to read you a quote from the Muslim Brotherhood. He said, the Muslim Brotherhood marched through the streets of Cairo, and they shouted, quote, "We are not afraid of death, but we desire it. How wonderful death is. Let us die in redemption for Muslims. Jihad is our course of action, and death in the cause of Allah, our most precious wish." Now, that is the Muslim Brotherhood, the grandfather of most of these movements that have come out, such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and I presume ISIL as well. The president is deluded, or else he's being led by people in the State Department who are trying deliberately to obfuscate the danger we face and the nature of our enemy. I think you must read this book, Islam, Religion of Peace or War. It tells about Muhammad. It has direct quotes from the Quran, direct quotes from the Hadith, wonderful historical background written by people who are themselves experts in Islamic teaching, in Arabic, and it's carefully thought out and beautifully illustrated, and we'll give it to you free, but you need to read it. And you have a president making an address to the nation saying that a group that calls itself the Islamic State in the Levant, who's putting Sharia law in effect in certain cities in Syria, and he says, well, they're not really Muslim. Please. Well, 13 years ago, Al-Qaeda launched the brutal attacks on New York and Washington. Now it's 9/11. Americans are worried that ISIS terrorists could be the next to strike the United States. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, scores of Americans are believed to have joined the ISIS jihad in Syria and Iraq, and they pose a serious threat to the United States, possibly through aviation. Government officials told members of the Homeland Security Committee they're trying to track terrorists with U.S. and other Western passports. But some in Congress also warned that terrorists could try to get into the U.S. through the vast southern border. Middle Eastern Christians booed Texas Senator Ted Cruz off the stage after speaking in support of Israel at an event here in Washington. It was sponsored by a group called In Defense of Christians. Cruz was there to speak about Christian solidarity with Israel and standing against terrorist groups like ISIS. But some in the crowd were Palestinian Christian supporters of the Syrian government and even the terrorist group Hezbollah. Our CBN News camera captured what happened next.
Those who hate Israel hate America. My heart weeps that the men and women here will not stand in solidarity with Jews and Christians alike who are persecuted by radicals.
Please respect for dialogue. Respect, please. Okay. We're in America.
If you will not stand with Israel and the Jews, then I will not stand with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
The event was billed as a gathering of Middle Eastern Christian leaders. They were trying to raise awareness about the threat to Arab minorities by Islamic terrorists. Well, a powerful solar flare is heading toward Earth, and it could disturb power grids, satellites, and radio transmissions. Scientists aren't sure which part of the Earth will bear the brunt, but the worst of the storm's effects apparently will stay a safe distance away. A direct hit from a future solar storm could cause extensive damage to communications and power systems and satellites in orbit. Ukraine says Russia has removed most of its forces, but the aftermath of months of battle has left in its wake a war-torn nation. And as George Thomas reports, CBN's Orphans Promise has been on the scene to help.
Here in the war zone of eastern Ukraine.
The problem is life has come to a standstill. Everything has stopped working. Hospitals, schools, factories, mines, shops.
Buildings riddled with bullet holes. Tanks rolling down highways. Heavily fortified checkpoints, all common sights along Ukraine's border with Russia.
Spend hours hiding in our bomb shelter, then come out for a few minutes, then go back down. What kind of life is this?
A shaky ceasefire between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists still holds, but people here know that could blow up at any moment.
We don't know when the shooting will start again and things get bad, but that's when we start worrying about our children.
In the Ukrainian provinces of Luhansk and Donetsk, the trauma from months of conflict takes its toll on both young
I'm so sad that I know what war is like.
And old.
God called us to stay and serve. We raised our family here, so we have nowhere else to go.
CBN's Orphans Promise has been on the ground for several months, responding to the desperate needs of people living in the conflict zone.
The risk to our staff is high, but we knew that we had to help.
Kucher says getting supplies as close to the front lines is key.
Those living near cities controlled by pro-Russian separatists are ones suffering most. There's no electricity, no water, no food. They are under constant threat.
Her team makes arrangements with local bakeries to deliver bread to hundreds of families. In addition, they bring sacks of potatoes, clothes, water, and other essential relief items.
Diapers are a big need here. We are so thankful for them. With shops closed, even getting the simplest things as a toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, and laundry detergent are difficult, so this is a huge blessing.
The influx of refugees burdens several small communities already feeling the strain of war.
I'm 77 years old and I see people fighting for bread every day. There are people from other cities displaced by war and they also need help as much as we do.
In communities where electricity works only sporadically, Kucher's team has been handing out Superbook videos.
The Superbook stories teach the children how to overcome harsh circumstances. The children need to hear this message, and so do the adults.
In one town recently recaptured by Ukrainian forces, Orphans Promise helps families rebuild their homes.
For example, a lot of homes have significant roof damage from rockets and other artillery fire. We want to get it fixed before winter comes.
With so much uncertainty and chaos around, residents say these simple acts of kindness will go a long way to eventually rebuilding lives.
I'm so happy that there are people like them in this country that worry about somebody else's pain and are trying to encourage the needy. Praise the Lord for that.
George Thomas, CBN News, in eastern Ukraine.
Pat, as George said, a little goes a long way for those in need.
It's amazing. Terry, this is your project, Orphans Promise. Were you over in the Ukraine, or you've just been sent
Well,
stuff?
our people are down there.
Yeah.
You know, they said the first bread that they brought in, people were almost mobbing the car because they were afraid they wouldn't come back. You know, in the 30s in the Holodomor, 30 million Ukrainians starved to death. So starvation as a part of their history is a great fear for them. So now that they know we're coming back, every week we bring down diapers, we bring down food, we bring down all the necessities that they can't get. Their bank accounts have been locked up for over 3 months. Pensions aren't coming in for elderly people. It's a mess.
Well, thank God you're there, and we're there. Ladies and gentlemen, these are people, some of them may be your relatives. You may have ancestors that came from the Ukraine. It's the oldest Christian country in Europe. They have over 1,000 years tradition of Christianity, and they're wonderful people, these Ukrainians, but they have suffered indeed. If you want to help, you can call our telephone numbers, toll-free 759-0700, and you can say it's Orphans Promise and special for the Ukraine, and we'll do something to help those people. But it's horrible. You know, you're right, under Stalin, he wanted to force those kulaks into collective farms, and he caused a famine where about 15 million people died.
It is horrific. I mean, the stories of what happened to people at that time. And there is in Kiev a museum to honor that group of people that lost their lives in that. But you know, it's like today we're thinking about 9/11 here in the United States when there's great loss that rings true in the hearts of people in a nation for many years.
Missouri has passed a 72-hour waiting period for women seeking abortions in that state. Democratic Governor Jay Nixon had vetoed the measure, calling it extreme and disrespectful toward women because it included no exceptions for rape or incest. But Missouri lawmakers overrode his veto. The Republican-led legislature argued that all unborn lives have an equal value, no matter how they're conceived. The measure requires women to consult a physician and then wait 3 days before having an abortion. Actor Richard Kiel has died. The 7'2" actor was famous for his role as the villain called Jaws in James Bond films. Kiel played the role so well, he was the only villain brought back because the public liked him so much. Kiel was also very open about his Christian faith, including appearing right here on the 700 Club. Richard Kiel was 74. Remember, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website. It's cbnnews.com.